So what is climate change? So by definition, climate change is a change in global climate patterns made from human or man-made, so from man-made or natural causes, which can be from the burning of fossil fuels, releasing carbon dioxide, or other greenhouse gases. So what does this mean? So if you see here in this graph, you can see how our CO2 levels have risen way beyond the historical level from before. So this is all like natural from before, depicting the ice ages and then the interglacial areas. But then ever since from post-industrial revolution, our CO2 levels have risen way beyond the historical levels. And so this shows you how it's not natural. This is not natural. This is man-made. So how does climate change work? So humans release fossil fuels, which release CO2 and other greenhouse gases. And these gases get trapped in our atmosphere. They can't be released from our atmosphere, and then they cause a heat trapping blanket around our atmosphere because they trap heat all over our atmosphere, which get all reflected by the sun and leads to temperature increases. And so how does this affect us? Well, there's going to be more natural disasters because there's going to be more intensified weather patterns. There's more desertification from increases in temperatures. There's ocean acidification because our ocean takes in CO2, and then the CO2 causes the pH of the ocean to rise. There's going to be more rain, more flooding, and the sea levels are rising from glaciers melting. So here's like a picture of the Arctic, and it shows you this is from the 1980s to now, how much the Arctic has melted. So you can't see in this light exactly, but this was all ice here, but now all the glaciers have retreated so much. This is taken in January as well.
Can you get the links? There you go.
Okay. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about air pollution, which greenhouse gases are kind of a cause of. So greenhouse gases are a type of air pollution. And so air pollution is basically just a mix of particles and gases in the air. And they're produced by car emissions, dust, and other chemicals. But the type of air pollutant I'm specifically looking at for this presentation is going to be called particulate matter 2.5. So it's basically atmospheric particle matter, so it's just atmospheric stuff. And it's from power plants, motor vehicles, wood burning, and more. And so this is it. So it's just a small, and this kind of gives you its size. And this is another particulate matter. And so how does climate change link to, how does air pollution link to climate change? Well, climate change worsens air pollution, and in turn, air pollution worsens climate change. So it's this negative feedback loop. And so air pollution worsens climate change because air pollution is released by humans and is trapped in our atmosphere, which causes temperature rises. But climate change, because it intensifies weather patterns, it will worsen air pollution because it's air pollution, which we all know soot is air pollution. This and our intensified weather patterns will actually make the particulate matter's effects worse. And so essentially air pollutants are greenhouse gases, which come from fossil fuels. This takes me to my first paper, which is COP21, Climate Negotiators' Responses to Climate Model Forecasts. Or in other words, how climate negotiators respond to climate science. So in this study, they take a sample of people from the Paris COP21 conference. So this is just the 2015 United Nations Climate Conference, and for this study, they discuss global mean temperature rises. So this is like the average of temperature rises by 2100. And the paper examines exactly how do climate models change expectations of negotiators. These are negotiators who will be making our laws based off of this science. So these are the negotiators' prior beliefs on temperature changes. So if you see here, this graph is just over 2 degrees Celsius, and around 10% of the negotiators thought that the temperature will rise by 2100, just over 2 degrees Celsius. Over here is 2 to 3 degrees Celsius, which is just which is around 35% of negotiators. 3 to 4 degrees Celsius is around 30% of negotiators. And just under 4 degrees Celsius is around 10% of negotiators. This thought that. Who was in the study? And then and for my survey, I decided to compare Pingree students' prediction on temperature rises compared to the negotiators. So if you see here, Pingree students, this is the percentage of people who thought this. If you took the survey, you would see that. To just over 2 degrees Celsius is around 10% of Pingree's population. To 3 degrees Celsius is around 30% of the population. 3 to 4 degrees Celsius is just under 40% of the population. And just under 4 degrees Celsius is around 30% of the population. So we're very similar to our negotiators in the beliefs. And then here's the science that's actually presented to the negotiators after they told their predictions. Yes, Dr. Sawyer?
How many people responded to your survey?
It was around 40, just under 40. And so here the climate science does actually show to the negotiators. So this is actually after they said their prior beliefs. And so there are 3 different formats that were shown. Format 1 is just showing the average, so it's just a box graph of the average. And this is all previous climate studies from climate scientists. And so this is shows the average that they believed that the temperature will rise by 2100 to around 3 degrees Celsius. Here it shows format 2 shows the outliers. So this shows these 4 studies are the outliers in the total amount of studies. And again, it shows the same average. And then format 3 shows the individual studies. So this shows you all the data points that they received. And so here are climate negotiators' responses. So they're most responsive to format 3, which was the one with all the climate studies. But overall, their opinions did not change much, if only by a 20% margin. So it shows you how, depending on how they were shown the information, their opinions changed. But altogether, it wasn't by much. So why is this paper important? Well, I wanted to show you how important it is to show climate science in the correct way. Except in this paper, with these formats, it was kind of it's out of touch kind of with the way it showed the information. It's showing temperature rises by 2100, but this isn't showing the present effects of climate change. This is showing the future effects of climate change. These are numbers that don't really make an effect. And they don't actually change much the negotiators' opinions if you look here. So this shows you how important the presentation of climate science is. When climate change is such a big part, such a big factor that's hurting the Earth, we should be presenting this information in a more connective way. So I'm going to be trying to actually show you climate science in a more connective way. And by doing that, I asked you guys in the survey, how many people who responded to the survey knew someone who was affected by a memory disorder like dementia and Alzheimer's? And if you see, most of the people who answered the survey was just under 70% answered yes. They knew someone or were affected by someone who had a memory disorder. And so this takes me to my next paper. Particulate air pollutants, apoalleles, and their contribution to cognitive impairment in older women and to amyloidogenesis in experimental models. Or in other words, air pollution particles effect on dementia in older women. So from earlier in the presentation, does anyone remember what air pollution is? Anyone? Yeah. Yeah, so it's just air pollution. This is just air particles in the air, which is released from car emissions and then from other gases and chemicals. And for my particular paper, do you guys remember what air pollutant I was specifically talking about? Yeah?
PM 2.5.
That's PM 2.5. So that's just to restate it, that's a particulate matter 2.5. It's just basically particles of stuff that's just in the atmosphere. And so this paper is trying to see, I'm going to restate it, is trying to see how these PM 2.5 will affect older women. So they subjected these 2 mice, E3FAD and E4FAD, both female mice, to 15 weeks to exposure with PM 2.5, and they tested the level of the A beta plaque, and this graph is showing the thiol-S, which is an identifier of the A beta plaque. So it's just a protein that tags A beta plaques to show its presence, and so A beta plaque is an identifier of Alzheimer's disease. So essentially, this is showing that with exposure to a particular matter, there's an increase of A beta plaque. There is the presence of A beta plaque. And then they decided to, knowing that there is a connection between PM 2.5 and Alzheimer's disease, they decided to look further into the brain. What is going on exactly? So they looked at the CA1 region in the hippocampus. Hippocampus is responsible for memory and learning, and so they looked specifically at the CA1 region. And they showed that there's a decrease in density in the CA1 neurons. So this is showing the area of the CA1 neurons, and it's showing how there's a decrease. You can see between the control and the mice that were exposed to the particular matter, there's a decrease in the CA1 neurites. So that means that this is an early marker of dementia. And then they also looked more specific. And they also looked more specifically in that region at the GLUR1 receptor protein. And so this is a receptor protein that sends signals between nerve cells, and it plays a part in memory and learning in the hippocampus. And when the mice were exposed to the particular matter again, there was a decrease in the GLUR1. So this all points, in conclusion, so the decrease in the GLUR1 protein, the decrease in the CA1 neurite density, and the increase in the A beta plaque, which was identified by the thiol-S, these all point to Alzheimer's dementia in the mice. So when these mice were exposed to the PM 2.5, they all pointed to the increased risk of Alzheimer's and dementia. So having this information about the air pollutants and how you have a risk to dementia and Alzheimer's after being exposed to air pollution, are you more concerned about air pollution and doing more about this? Anyone? Yeah? Yes. Yeah?
Yes. Yeah.
So great. So in conclusion, I'm trying to show you how important it is to show climate science that is happening now, and instead of showing something that's happening in the near future, and you can see seeing how air pollutants affect us so much already. Sharing this science in the correct way is extremely important to make change, especially with our world leaders. Our world leaders need to know that this is happening now, and it's not something that's happening in the future. It's going to affect future generations. It is affecting generations now and affecting our lives now. So that brings me to the question: why aren't we doing more? And what can we do to change this? And how can we present information the correct way to communities so that they would understand such information? And I want to say that this is the goal of Project 80 and Journal Club and other research groups at Pingree, to show this information the correct way, so this information can be communicated to the general public in a way that they can understand. So, thank you. Any questions? Yeah?
Are those PM 2.5, I think it's called, are those naturally occurring, or they're only from?
They're from car emissions and power plants and wood burning. So they're I guess you can say that they're naturally occurring, but they're
like
man-made. Yeah. Yeah, what you saying?
In the study with the mice,
Uh-huh.
you said they exposed the mice for 15 days?
15 weeks.
15 weeks.
Yeah.
That's better.
So it's like 3 days for every 15 weeks.
Okay, and so did they expose them at levels that are similar to what you would imagine, like what they would correlate to actual air pollution in a city, or was it like how did they determine how much?
I did not actually look at the levels, how much they exposed them to, but I assume so. I'll get back to you.
Okay.
Do you know if more of the climate science research that's being done is being done about the future or being done about like present studies?
I'm not exactly sure. From what I've seen, both. But
Interesting.
Any other questions?
Is it easier? Is like the reason why, like you said that there's more on like the future because it's easier to do like projections? Or
Yeah,
is
because essentially climate change, it is, because it is happening now, but it's more so like, because we're looking at the overall, like what's happening to Earth because of what we're doing right now in the future, but it's important for people to actually care about it, to see that it's actually happening in places now. Like there's, like El Nino is caused by climate change in parts, so it's important to connect to people now. Yeah, okay.
Do we have any announcements? Okay, but just so everybody knows, this Sunday is the research exhibit from 11:30 to 2:30. All of the research groups will be showing what they've done so far and showing their work, so it'll be really awesome if you guys can come out and support us. Next week, we will have our own Journal Club team member presenting, Julia Dannenbaum, presenting on the history of organ transplants and how technology is changing what it means for people today. So